Chess YouTube, it is only move 9, and in this position, Magnus Carlsen, he attacks with the G-pawn. Here we go. This right here is the game of the century. And real fast, the reason I'm covering this game today is Hikaru Nakamura, he knows who I am. He responded to me on school.com, and in response, I promised him I would cover the greatest game of his entire career in this video right here. This is the game of the century, Hikaru Nakamura's immortal game versus Magnus Carlsen. Here we go. In the game, Hikaru playing as what? Opens 1e4, best by test, and Magnus 1c5, the Sicilian Defense. The sharpest and most combative response to 1e4. All right, knight f3 and then e6. Magnus likely heading for a con or a Tamanov Sicilian if white does go d4, the open Sicilian. However, in the game, Hikaru, he has different ideas in mind. He plays the move c3, the Alapin Variation, a very solid line. The point is white's trying to go d4 with the d4 pawn supported by the c pawn. That way, if black ever takes on d4, white takes back like this, and white maintains the very strong pawn on d4. Of course, there are plenty of ways for black to respond. In the game, Magnus plays maybe the strongest move here. That is simply knight to f6, pressuring the pawn on e4. And of course, no matter how you defend this pawn, every single move has its drawbacks. If you go e5, the pawn could be weak later in the game. If you go bishop d3, it's kind of awkward. Queen c2 also very awkward, and d3 is a little passive. So no matter what you do here, it has its drawbacks. In the game, Hikaru plays the very cheeky idea of bishop d3, defending with the bishop. Now, hold on, isn't that piece blocking the d2 pawn? Well, yes, but the idea is you want to go bishop to c2, dropping back, and therefore freeing up that pawn and defending e4. It's a decent idea, but a little bit slow. In the game, Magnus, in response, d5, counterattacking in the center right away. Now, Hikaru, e5, pushing the pawn. The knight goes back to d7, the best square, pressuring e5. And now, of course, white would love to go d4, the typical idea in this French defense pawn structure. But of course, the bishop blocks the pawn. Therefore, bishop c2 makes a lot of sense here. And from here, Magnus, before white can go d4, seizing control of the center, he plays the move c4. Now, this is super interesting. The idea being now, if white does go d4, black can capture on d3 en passant, the French move where you capture on the diagonal like that. So, white here, what will he do? Of course, if you don't go d4 sooner or later, black's going to have this clamp in the center, and your bishop on c1 is never going to enter the game. So you kind of do have to go d4 sooner or later, and black will be ready for it with the en passant recapture. From here, Hikaru, he castles, very playable. Black, knight c6, pressuring e5. Now, very importantly here, black has two pieces attacking e5 versus the one piece defending, and therefore white here is going to have to support the pawn a little bit more. Hikaru, rook to e1 is the move, defending with the rook, but Magnus, this guy is absolutely relentless. He goes queen c7, adding a third piece into the attack. We have 1, 2, 3 attackers versus the 1, 2 defenders. Therefore, white must bring another piece into the defense of that pawn. And the only way you can do it, of course, is going to be queen to e2. Now there are 1, 2, 3 attackers versus 1, 2, 3 defenders. So far, so good. It's still a pretty typical game of chess, but this right here is where Magnus Carlsen, he lights the board on fire. He plays the move g5, a brilliant move, the strongest move in the position by far. And this is just absolutely nuts. What is the idea? It's a deflection sacrifice. Of course, that knight on f3, it has to stay there on f3 to support the e5 pawn. However, if the knight takes on g5, then e5 falls, and black suddenly wins the critical central pawn. And from there, the game would be absolutely nuts. Will Hikaru go for it? Turns out, no, he will not. He counters in the center with the move d4. Of course, there is that principle. The flank attack is best met by an attack in the center of the board. And typically that is true. However, here, this move was not the strongest. Instead, in this position, b3, attacking c4 is actually the right way forward. Instead, d4 played in the game. It looks very logical. You defend e5. You also attack g5 with the bishop. Of course, the bishop can take on g5 without losing control of e5. So, a solid idea, but black here, he just takes on d3. C takes d3, the en passant recapture. If you don't know this, when you have a pawn 2 squares forward next to a different pawn like this, the opponent can capture on the diagonal. So, C takes d3, played in the game, en passant. Bishop takes d3 is the response. And now Magnus, g4. Here we go, advancing the g-pawn. Gary, the debt collector, as Epic Chess would say. And now the knight must move back. Where's he going to go? In the game, Hikaru, he goes forward, knight d4, but in response, he relinquishes control of that e5 pawn. Black targeting it with the knight and the queen. That pawn is going to fall sooner or later. However, all is not lost. Hikaru, he now has pressure on g4, meaning if the e5 pawn falls, the g4 pawn falls as well. Now, Magnus, he takes on e5. Queen takes e5. And here's the problem for Hikaru. He can't take on g4, as then there's the back rank mate. Queen takes e1. Magnus, seeing one step further into the future, he popped out of his time machine and saw everything start to finish. And Hikaru here, he's got to back up. Queen d1 is the move, keeping the attack on the pawn on g4, but renewing the attack on the queen with the rook. Now the queen's got to go back. Where's it going to go? In the game, queen to f6 was chosen. A good square for the queen. It turns out in this position, with the king side being so vulnerable, black has to keep the queen actually on the king side, not on the queen side. And that is for defensive reasons to defend the black king, but also offensive reasons to attack the white king with the queen and potentially the rook and maybe the h-pawn as well. Something like this is coming for black. All right, Hikaru, his big problem right here is sort of like a martial attack. All of his queenside pieces, the bishop, the knight, and the rook, just like in the martial attack, they are all undeveloped. And therefore, Hikaru, his #1 goal right here is to bring every single piece on the queen side into the defense. He starts bishop e3, a solid move. But Magnus Carlsen, this guy is relentless. h5 is the move, attacking with the h-pawn on the king side here in this game of the century. All right, Hikaru, he knows he must counterattack as soon as possible. He goes bishop b5, a good move, pressuring that poor knight on c6, pressuring this diagonal, and also opening up lines of attack by the queen on the d file. So Hikaru trying to find some way to fight his way back into this game and to distract the goat from the king side. Now, Magnus, how should he respond? Well, it turns out knight c to e5 is the right move. The point being, you are bringing one more piece into the attack. It eyes the f3 square, potentially threatening knight f3 ideas in the future. That is the way forward. Instead, here, Magnus, he finds a very aggressive move, but not necessarily the best one. The move here for Magnus is e5, attacking the knight with the pawn. Now, Hikaru, the knight is under attack. What do you do? Well, here, Hikaru, his spidey sense was tingling. He digs deep, and he calculates everything out. And here, he does not defend the knight. That is your one hint. This is a good time for a puzzle. If you like puzzles, pause the video and comment down below what you think the right combination is here for Hikaru. And again, your one hint, you don't defend the knight. Here, Hikaru, in the game of the century, he digs deep and plays the unthinkable move c4. C4. You don't defend the knight. Instead, you counterattack on d5. The point is, if you take on d4, bishop takes d4, wins the queen. E takes, bishop takes, and there's a check on the king on the e8 square. That is the reason. Hikaru, he sees everything. Therefore, here, Magnus, he cannot take on d4. Oh no. Instead, the move here for Magnus is a6. He attacks the bishop. Now the knight and the bishop are both under attack, but it turns out this move is not the most precise. In case you're curious, knight takes d4 was the way forward. Instead, a6 played in the game. Now Hikaru, what does he do? The knight's under attack. The bishop is under attack. What do you do, Hikaru? he doesn't defend anything. Knight to c3 is the move. The knight jumps up, joins the party. It's having some fun, threatening d5. That knight will be cooking. All right, black here. Again, 2 pieces under attack. What do? Again, you cannot take the knight. There is still the double attack on the queen and the king. Therefore, here, Magnus, he takes on b5. Magnus Carlsen is officially up a bishop in this game. But Hikaru here, knight takes d5, the knight jumps in, the queen goes back, then the other knight jumps in, knight takes b5, threatening either knight to the c7 square with the fork on the king and the rook. Hikaru fighting back in this game. All right, now, Magnus, rook b8 is the move, the best move, simply stepping out of the attack. But Hikaru, knight d to c7, he jumps in, going for the kill, hits the king. It's got to go to either d8 or e7. In the game, king d8 chosen, and now Hikaru, he spots an absurd idea. Bishop to b6 is the move. The point being now the knight can go anywhere with the discovered attack on the king, and the king still can't go back to e8, and if you go to, say, e7, it's still vulnerable there to all kinds of ideas, including queen d6 in the future. So Hikaru here lining up threats. What will Magnus do? Well, he goes bishop b4, attacking the rook on the e1 square. But this is kind of helping Hikaru. He can ignore the attack and just go, for example, knight d5 with the attack on the king. Instead, though, rook e3 chosen in the game. The rook lift, also a dangerous idea. Now, Magnus, the bomb cloud move, king to e7, his favorite move on the chessboard. It would not be a Magnus Carlsen chess game without king to e7 being played in the middle game. Now, knight d5. The knight drops back. It's a little bit misplaced on c7. It's not doing a whole lot anymore, but here it drops back, attacks the king, attacks the bishop, and eyes the king side. All right, the king goes back, king to f8. Actually, a good square for the king. The king very safe on f8, and of course the rook on h8 can always go to, say, g8 or stay on h8 and push the pawn down the board, and the rook will be decently active. Now here, Hikaru, bishop c7, attacks the rook. The idea being maybe the bishop will get back into the game on this diagonal. Maybe. All right, here, Magnus, bishop c5. He ignores the attack on his own rook, and he counterattacks on the other rook. Here, 2 rooks are under attack. What is Hikaru going to do? Rook to e2. He slides back. Rook to a8. The other rook also slides over. And then here, Hikaru, what's the idea? Well, he has to defend f2, but also it's very important to set up the threat of b4, pressuring the bishop, b4, if I can draw arrows correctly. Therefore, here, Hikaru, this guy is a machine. Queen d2, the machine move with the machine mind, threatening b4, pushing back the critical bishop. Of course, if it goes back, then c5 will lock it out of the game forever. All right, Magnus, king g7, getting the king off the back rank, the weird fianchetto of the king. But now Hikaru, the follow-up, the strong move, b4, expanding on the queen side, pushing the bishop back. Of course, if you go back to, say, b6, then c7 will lock the piece out. So here, Magnus, what's the move? Well, he goes forward, bishop d4, threatening the rook, but this is a mistake because that bishop, the precious dark squared bishop, the king's Indian defense bishop, that piece is just so important here. And for that reason, bishop to f8 here was the right move. Instead, bishop d4 played in the game, but you lose the bishop on the spot. Here, Hikaru, knight takes d4 is the move, e takes d4 in response, and then b5, the key move on the queen side, driving back the pony. Where is it going to go? Well, it's not going anywhere because Magnus, he counterattacks on d3. d3 is the move, hitting the rook on the e2 square. The rook is hanging, the knight is hanging, rook to e3, the rook lift again on the third rank, and then knight d8. The knight drops back in the game of the century. Now here, Hikaru, knight d7. This guy is not letting up. He attacks the queen on g6 and infiltrates on the 7th rank. What do you call a knight on the 7th rank? It's not an octopus. I'm going to call it a kraken. The kraken on the 7th rank. Now, queen g5 is the move. The queen slides up and attacks the kraken. But here, Hikaru, he does not defend. He does not slow down. Instead, the move here is f4, attacking on the king side. He wants the queen, but it turns out this move right here is the right idea, but the wrong execution. Chess is just a difficult game. Instead, here, the key move h4 was a little more precise. Instead, f4 played in the game. Magnus, he takes on f3. G takes f3, opening up the g file and the attack on the king on the g1 square. Bishop to g3. The bishop flies back, and then knight to e6. Magnus slowly but surely bringing every single piece into the attack. The knights, the rook, the queen. More and more pieces will come and join the party on the king side. But now Hikaru, knight d5. He drops back, trying to defend. h4 for Magnus. The h-pawn enters the game. My favorite move is white. h4 like this. Now, queen c3. The queen slides over and checks the king, and Magnus, if he finds one move, he will have everything under control in this game, and that one move is simply the Ben Feingold counterattack f6, and Magnus, he finds it, f6, f6, Magnus, knight to f6, he makes the mistake, and Hikaru, rook takes f3, attacking the pin piece. Magnus jumping in with the knight into the pin of the queen, and now rook takes f3 with the triple attack of the rook, the knight, and the queen. How can black defend? It turns out it's not easy. Rook h6 may be the only defense. Here, Magnus, he takes on g3 first. Of course, that bishop is hanging. H takes g3, played in the game. Then the problem, though, is rook takes g3, pins the queen to the king. Hikaru, he's done it. The queen has fallen. Rook h6 tries to defend, but then rook f1, piling up more and more pressure on the poor pony on f6. Here, Magnus, he's had enough waiting around. Queen takes g3. He sacks the queen on g3 before I run out of breath. H takes g3 is the response, and then d2. Magnus doing everything he can, pulling out every single trick possible. But it's not enough. Here, knight takes f6, wins the knight on the f6 square. Hikaru, up the queen, up the knight. What can Magnus do? d1 promotes to a queen. Magnus, he's not giving up. He's pulling out every single trick. But of course, Hikaru, he spots the threat. Rook takes d1 is the move. Black, rook takes f6, and then the final move of the game, the final nail in the coffin, the final move before the cremation of Magnus Carlsen, rook to f1. And in this position, Magnus Carlsen, he knows he just got eviscerated by Hikaru, and he simply resigns on the spot. Wow, what a game of the century by Hikaru Nakamura. I told you, Chess YouTube. Hikaru responded to me online. He acknowledged my existence. I feel like Sofia Vergara herself just asked me out. I am completely speechless, and therefore I had to deliver this game of the century, Hikaru Nakamura's immortal game versus the GOAT, Magnus Carlsen. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please smash that like button. And if you want to connect with me online, go to my school community. Link is down below in the description and the comment. I'm running a 30-day chess challenge right now. The goal is to see who can increase their peak rating the most in 30 days or less. I am giving away cash prizes, also free one-on-one coaching sessions, or a free one-on-one 10-game blitz match versus me for the winner. So if you want to join the challenge, it starts August 1st, 2025, next month. So the link is down below. Make sure to join, and we'll have some fun there. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond, and I'll see you in the next video.